Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Laureli Shimayo. This is our MeWe Awakening panel for energizing body, mind, heart, and soul. We have events throughout the Northwest and many events online. This is our online awakening panel. It's free to be here to listen and learn, and a small price to ask a question of the panel. Every panel has a different theme. Our theme today is shadow play, delving into our shadow. We all have a different perspective, how we work with people on that, all sorts of different ways of talking about shadow. But we will be doing that first before we start answering questions. There are 6 of us on the panel, so we'll all go through and share a bit about who we are and what we do, and then let's talk about shadow afterwards. So let's introduce ourselves first, and then we'll talk about the panel after. So do about 2-minute introductions at first. Yeah, and then we'll be answering questions. It's a small price to ask a question. I put the information on how to pay in the chat. I haven't checked to see if anyone's already paid. I'll go do that in the next few minutes. If you do pay to ask a question, if you could please let me know in the chat also, that would be great, and I'll make sure that I get you in line. All right. Well, yeah, let's have people. I'm trying to think, is there something else I need to share in the beginning? I feel like there is, but I'm not thinking of it right now. All right. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and start our introduction. So are you okay, Lisa, starting us off like we did earlier? Is that good? Okay, so Lisa, Henry, Susie, Karen, and Val. Great.
Welcome, everybody. This is an interesting topic tonight, and one that I find that I have my own personal experience in, having been kind of a person who focused a lot on ignoring my shadows. So I have a background in yoga. I spent 20 years teaching and 27 practicing. Over the last couple of years, I've sort of turned it into just a movement practice that illuminates the shadowy places within my body and how they reflect the thoughts that I have. So as I move and take different shape and unform the parts of me that I have held within certain forms, I have turned more towards allowing those to rise and shine through my mind. And I have a lot of guidance with warriors of love, is what I've called them. And any of you that know me from past panels, I used to go by Lisa Love Warrior, but I've been guided to call it more of a mind morpher, because I believe that all the healing that we can do doesn't necessarily sort of like stick with us unless we can learn how to change the way that we think as well. But changing my thoughts never really changed the vibration of my body. So I teach people how to shift and understand their energy body, and how that can actually shift the energy of the mind instead of using a lot of words around it, which is ironic because it takes understanding it with our time. It is an energetic shift, and shifting and changing my energy body and helping others do that is more of a, I guess, maybe a slightly different approach based off of my background and the things that I learned as a yoga practitioner. So I hope to hear more from other people tonight, and I enjoy hearing from the other practitioners as well, and look forward to all of this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Right, Henry is next. Yeah, Henry's next.
Yeah. So I am a certified life coach, and this is what I did most. But then the tarot found me, and it bypasses sometimes the intellect, and connects more with some more spiritual or more elevated, higher vibrations. And this is what I love so much about it, and especially with shadow work. So I came to shadow work late, maybe 15 years ago. And it's a powerful thing to realize what all is in shadow. And I think sometimes using the tarot, you can access what's in shadow that you normally have put something in place to not know. So people often come to me about their purpose. And it's sort of like this nebulous thing. I don't know what my purpose is. And it's in shadow. That's all. And it's usually in shadow because somebody said you don't get to do this, or this is hard, or this isn't appropriate for you, or you can't make any money with that. And so we have all these reasons, and then we put it in shadow and we forget, and then we don't know why we're confused or why we feel at a loss sometimes, or feel less than satisfied. So shadow work is one of my favorite things to do because it is incredibly receptive to love. So often we want to do shadow work by fixing it or all right, thank you very much, by fixing it or by changing it. And what I've discovered for myself is that loving whatever is in shadow is enormously healing. So I just so look forward to us being together this evening with this, one of the most wonderful subjects I can think of. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Henry. Susie.
Hi, I'm Susie, and I'm a channel. And so what that means is that I set my conscious mind aside and allow divine to come through, or that energy to come through in whatever aspect that is most accessible for you, because I feel that it's in you developing a comfort level with your guides or with whatever is going on, that you can look at the shadow that you're looking at, those things that you don't think are pretty, or what you think might be embarrassing to look at, but we all work together. I can do energy work, which includes doing body scans. Frequently, you'll hold blockages within your body, whether it's emotions or past lives or traumas or all that within your body. And we use breath work and imagery and meditations, guided meditations, to help you work through and at least integrate them so that you can clear your path for a heartfelt life. It's let's see, my website's bluelightninghealing.com, and there I've got a podcast page which has links to all my podcasts. And I have talked with Wyatt Larson about doing shadow work or shadow play, um, and it's important work, and I don't think it's going to end. I'm pleased people are here tonight so that we can all work together to illuminate our own shadows and bring them forward in such a way that we can be comfortable with them and be okay with it and move forward from there. Thanks.
Thanks, Susie. Karen.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for having me. My name is Karen Coccia with KarenCoccia.com. You can find me on Facebook, Finding Soul Alignment with Karen Coccia. I am a quantum healer and soul alignment coach, and I help my clients to get rid of everything that they're not, so that they can be everything they came to this earth, to this incarnation to be. And so I get to work in shadow work all the time. And I want to point out, by the way, that I love that we're calling it shadow play, because when we call it shadow work, sometimes we take it too seriously. So it's awesome that it's being called play, because it can be something light, right? And so many times it's projections and it's triggers and it's beliefs that we've taken on of somebody else, that this isn't okay, or this isn't what I'm supposed to be like. And we hide it and we don't want to look at it, and we don't want to address it. We don't want to see it. We don't want to be it. And so when we start to clear all of those aspects of ourselves that we haven't allowed to come into who we are, we start to become who we actually came here to be. So this is my absolute favorite time of year, because it's that typical shadow work season. And I'm just so excited to spend this evening talking about it tonight. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking with you all about this more.
Thanks so much, Karen. Val.
Hi, everybody. I'm Val, poetval.com is my website. Talks about my healing work and my poetry. And I don't even know where to start. I love just listening so far. As a shamanic practitioner, when I work with a client, I'll use a rattle, I'll use a drum, I'll use a tool to bring us into that non-ordinary reality state, to get out of that frontal brain state. And one thing I love is I've been studying healing and have had a healing practice. I mean, I was doing healings when I was in my teens. I was teaching at 19, I was teaching healing classes. So I've been doing this really all my life and studying this and studying that. And I know a lot. But what I love about shamanic work is once we start a session, we go somewhere that I would never have imagined, that I could never have come up with through my learnings and teachings and knowingness, that it's metaphorical, which just lights up my poetic self. We might go to we go into the upper world, underworld, middle world. We might extract things that don't belong to you. We might find pieces of your soul that have been split off and bring it back. And all of that retrieval brings just phenomenal gifts of things that we've lost. But what I really want to say is that in our languaging, we value light over dark, and we think, oh, I want to be in the light. I want to be in the light. And so as a poet, I want to go right to the definitions. Like, what is light? What is dark? What is the shadow? I'm liking the word enlightened right now, that I think when I'm in an enlightened, lighter, lightened up state, I'm a little calmer within the storms. And I'm in a lot of storms lately. I know none of you are. I know it's only me, but just saying, for me to find a way to be okay and to be messy, sloppy sometimes, and then to come back and be okay again, that it is play. That's just, that is play, and it is magic. And especially in the New Age community, we tend to want to bypass and say, this is good and this is bad, and I want to surgically take this out of me. So I think all the healers and practitioners who here will agree that the whole self is where the juice is at, and where really the life force and the beauty and our magic and what we get to bring to each other and walk with. So I do think in the New Age community, it's a big thing we have to overcome. People will accuse you of not praying hard enough or not doing the work if you're going through your dark nights of the soul. So I love the welcoming. I know everything is welcome here. And so, yeah, let's play with our shadows. Thanks. I don't know, Lorelai's still talking to her dog. Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, my partner just came home and my dog's going crazy trying to see her. And so I'm trying to like, so she came in, but now he's eating all of his food because she's here. It's so goofy. Oh, goodness. We creatures, we're fun. Oh, I'm Laureli Shimayo. I'm an intuitive eye reader and a body psychology coach. I believe that we all read eyes all the time. Like, eyes are a window to the soul, and I think we all naturally see into each other's souls. You can get a sense of that if you imagine when you see someone with dark sunglasses and you can't see their eyes. So much is missing. And as soon as you see their eyes, there's so much here. So I read your eyes, read your soul to answer questions about your soul, your purpose, practical questions on this plane, things like your career path, relationships you're in. I look in their eyes if you show me photos to help answer questions about their soul and how your souls interact. If you're wanting to connect with people for business or relationship, I do matchmaking with you, whatever the context is. And the body psychology work is where, by being more aware of your body and the messages your body gives you, you can make choices and shift in places where you're stuck, just all kinds of different things. And there's so much more awareness you can have of other people too. That's the kind of work that I do. And we have more and more people coming to join us. It's great. And yeah, so let's, we already started to talk a little bit about shadow, but let's go into a deeper conversation about shadow. We can kind of start in order and then, yeah, but anyone's practitioners are welcome to jump in. So Lisa, if you want to start and share more, or Beth.
I would just love, before people start to share, as a poet, as a word freak, I'd love to hear anybody here as they go into talking about shadow, maybe define the light, define the dark, and define the shadow if you're moved to that as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Val. I appreciate that a lot, especially in listening to you. I feel I also love words, and especially when I start receiving words from my guides, I don't always know the definition, and they use a vocabulary with me that Lisa doesn't use a lot of the time. So I love to search for what the meaning is. Just a brief overview again. I spent a lot of time, in the yoga community because yoga made me feel better. Just in general, it made me feel better. But because I became so dedicated to it, it also, it was starting to reveal, and it was also deepening my awareness of myself and my awareness of my environment. So I became more sensitive. But the physical poses actually became more of a hindrance to my work. I was also in a relationship that some of you have just heard the story before, where I ended up needing to leave that relationship because I was not focusing on me. I was focusing on him. And so I ended up making a very difficult decision, because he was somebody that, and this is where morphing mind stuff starts to come through in my work, is he was somebody that I met in 1987 and married in 2014. So in my mental structure, that person, and past life stuff, of course, was in every part of my cellular makeup, if you want to put it like that. And so my focus to make him a better person. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. But tearing myself out of that relationship was also like this, it was like there was so much of us that was intertwined because of those dynamics, that when I left him, it was excruciatingly painful. And so my experience was having to dive deeper, and I was fortunate enough to be in a situation where my spirit guides literally swooped in, and I started hearing information, and they started speaking to me in a clairaudient or telepathic way. And I fell apart. I completely fell apart and dropped down into the word that's coming out right now is like a hole. But at the same time, as I'm saying that and visualizing it, that hole was completely surrounded by love. I was being held in divine presence at all times, no matter how painful it was. And so what I do is illuminating heart readings, but it includes my path and past as a yoga teacher, because I have a knowledge of the human body and the emotions and how the mind and the spirit are all intertwined in all of that. So when I think of what light is, I feel it as a resonance of, it's kind of strange. Well, I don't know if this is strange for some of you, but the word that wants to come through is a resonance of imperfection in all of its perfection. Because and again, this is a story I've told of myself many times, that I was and still can be a perfectionist. But my striving for perfection was causing a lot of pain in me, and probably even my behavior towards other people to be perfect as well. And I want to be careful not to make it sound like I was like that all the time, because I'll just take a moment to speak well of myself and say that as a yoga teacher, I became very good at caring for other people who were also, let's just call it like kind of damaging themselves through this idea of perfection, and especially this idea of a perfect body. So as far as the darkness goes, or these shadowy places, right now I'm starting to feel it kind of like a tickle. Like it's, like almost like a little warm hand that came up over my shoulder and starts to tickle my awareness of what needs to come forward and come forth, like so many of you have talked about, in order for me to be more fully who I am. And Henry has said it a couple of times that loving it is where I gain the most respect for all of who I am. Being able to embrace and hold the parts of me that I've hated. And I know that's a really strong word. It might make a lot of people uncomfortable, but I believe I lived a life of self-hatred in order for me to turn, especially at this time in our world and in our humanity's history of time, to turn towards all of that and change the frequency of hatred towards love here, all of here. So I think I'm going to stop there and let somebody continue. So blessings to everybody, and let's do this.
Great, beautiful. I want to check in with Val. Were you wanting us to just briefly talk about the definitions first before we go deeper? What would you like us to do?
Well, I just thought as people go deeper, they might start with that if they have something to say about that. Because they're words that we use and we don't always, the magic is knowing the words, and we all may have a little different sense of what it means.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, and Henry. You are muted though.
This is really great, and I appreciate you, Val, for saying that. So, Carl Jung came up with the term shadow, and so this is quite a while ago now. And I think that we have made enormous strides since then, especially in the New Age community, or also in therapy and everything, to where we're much less looking at something being wrong or something being right, and looking at it more as perhaps dynamism. So this is how I understand shadow. And I think, see, where shadow makes sense is that when something is in shadow, it's less visible. And so this would be one of the ways where shadow makes sense to me, because so often we don't know what's in shadow. And this is partly why it can remain in shadow. Like, for example, for me, being curious was in shadow until the other day, when I read this wonderful article on medium.com where somebody reclaimed their curiosity, saying that people in female bodies, I don't identify as a woman, I'm non-binary, but I am in a female body, and I have that experience where I'm told being curious is not appropriate. Like, remembering my mom saying, oh, you're always so curious, like nosy, right? And so that was in shadow. So my curiosity is a powerful tool for learning, for expanding, and for being able to also help people. Like, imagine as a life coach or a tarotist, if I am not curious about you, what are we doing here? Like, I'm here to be in service of you. If I don't find out about what's going on with you and what matters to you, if I don't bring that curiosity, that would be, really sorely missing. So I see shadow in that sense. I understand that, like light. I'm not fond of this term anymore for this reason. I'm a little bit new, so I'm not very good at what I'm going to be saying now. And if anybody wants to correct me, I'm totally up for being taught. It just seems to me that as white people, we have this light dark thing, that like light is better than dark. And so I think there's like a racial or cultural or something going on there. And I'm studying it, so my understanding is still limited. So I think about being careful to pull back from that light and dark. But I do like the idea of it being in shadow and it coming out of shadow. And yes, Lisa, loving it lets it come out of the shadow, because like what's in our shadow is the things that we abuse, we judge them, or perhaps sometimes we conquer them. Like, I conquered this thing, and we don't realize that we haven't loved it. And so then it has to end up in the shadow and going, I hope someday I could come out. It's like, what is wholeness? Wholeness is when we integrate everything, when we care about everything, that is who we are. And when we find the rightful place for all these things, like curiosity isn't rightful all the time. Like, if Stephen is on the phone talking to somebody, it's not great if I say, who are you talking to? That's not the right time for it. So this is how I define that. I hope that, Val, that this has made sense in terms of what you wanted to look for. So I see what we refer to as light and dark, the natural, powerful, profound dynamism of life. Because if we just had one or just had the other, or too much of one and not enough of the other, we would be out of balance, and also life would not be intriguing. So like, if you ever written a story and you wanted to make the story all just happy-go-lucky and rainbows and puppy tails and all that, you very quickly notice that it's boring. It really genuinely is. We need tension, we need dynamism, we need contrast. And this is what I say, or how I feel, what I feel the purpose of shadow is. So I don't think we should be healed from it, or we should make everything light. I think that we should integrate it. That's it.
Oh, great. This is such a fun conversation. Go ahead, Susie.
And Henry said a whole lot of what I was going to talk about. No, it's awesome.
Sorry.
No worries, because it assures me that yeah, external validation is occasionally a good thing to have. But you talked about balance, and you talked about a spectrum of experience. And I, for me, shadow work is looking at those things I've kind of just compartmentalized and set aside. That whether it's like, no, I don't want to deal with that right now, or I'm afraid of what I'm going to find. I feel like I'm going to be on the brink of doing some intense shadow work this year. So we'll get to check in with me at some point. And Lisa, you were talking about loving the shadow. People who have been here before have heard my cancer experience. I had 17 months of treatment. That was facing a big ass fear on my part. And I got through it. And someone once tried to talk me into loving the cancer. With the history I have with cancer, I can't love it. I just can't. But I could love myself over it. I could love that I wanted to change the outcome. I wanted to change the end of that story. That was a huge bunch of shadow work, but I don't feel that it's the end of it. There are so many other things. You get to look at it and like, okay, I looked at this, and Henry, you talked about integrating it. That's when I went, okay, you're 3 for 3. Well done. For what I was for what part of my definition is. But integrating it, as I said earlier, I don't feel like you can resolve it. You can make it go away, but you can, well, love it or befriend it, get more comfortable with it, not be ashamed of it. For me, life is a spectrum of experience. It's not 0, 1, yes, no, black, white. There is gray. There are numbers, even between 0 and 1. There's an infinite number of numbers in between there. And with gender expression, it's not limited. And so there is so much that we can encompass. And shadow work is part of that. It's finding that balance. What can we do to be, mm, I don't want to think it's happy with ourselves, but to be comfortable with ourselves, to be accepting of ourselves for how we are and what our experiences have been. Um, Shame, yeah, that's part of the experience, but that would be the shadow part that I wouldn't want to live in all the time. It may keep me aware of my responses, of something I'm doing, but then it needs to, for me, I get to let go of it. And we get to let go of these things that aren't serving us. We talk about being in service, and life experiences in service to us too, to help our souls grow and to become part of the greater whole. And I feel that shadow is part of that. It is part of the greater whole, and we get to explore it. And at first, I think, was it you, Henry, who talked that you thought it was good to call it shadow play? I apologize because I brain cramped on who said it. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate you reminding me. But shadow play, you thought that was a great thing. And in some cases, I feel it can be. But when I hear shadow play, I see like puppets, woo, the Muppet hand and stuff like that. And it's not always that, but it depends on at what level you're working at. If you want to find something that's easier to deal with, that, you know, why did I bristle at that? It's like I can do that, and it could be considered practice into working at something deeper and deeper. There are people who don't address those really deep issues. That brings up another thing. I know Henry said that black and white, it brings up this racial feel to it. And that was intriguing to me. That's very intriguing to me that I'm going to have to think about and work on later. But to have that, um, the binariness of it, I don't believe that that's the way divine works. I don't believe that's what source is. Uh, and shadow work helps us to grow, helps us to heal, integrate, and move forward. And I think I'm talked out right now. Thanks.
Great. Go ahead, Karen, and then Val. Think about whether you want me to share first before you share. I'm wondering about doing that. So you'll have mine in here too and pull it all together. But go ahead, Karen.
So I have a lot of different thoughts and I'm trying to figure out how on earth to put them all together, but I want to start with so much to say. I want to start with Val's little challenge of, I think light and dark have so many definitions. And so for tonight's discussion, I really want to look at light as like illuminating, right? Shining the light on it, so it can surface, so it can be seen, so it can be addressed and healed and reintegrated or released, depending on what it is and where it's coming from. And then the darkness, it's really the repressed, the rejections, the projections of others. But it's also potentially what makes us unique. It's what makes us who we are and what we came here to be. And I think it was Susy who was saying something along these lines. Like, one of the things that I used to get yelled at for when I was a child was daydreaming. And I would have teachers slam their hands on the desk and yell at me, "Karen, stop daydreaming." And I'd snap to attention, and I kind of like eventually got out of that habit. And now it's kind of like what I do, right? I mean, I get a client and I talk to them, and then we have to go exploring, and it's kind of like daydreaming in a way, because we're looking at all of the stuff that's not linear. And it's like, but if I wasn't willing to heal some of those aspects of myself that I had taken on as those projections of others, because they decided it wasn't serving me. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Waldeck, but it's serving me now, So there was one other big thing I wanted to do. Oh, so the other thing I wanted to say is that instead of rejecting those aspects of self, what if we instead rejected the judgments behind them and really started to look at ourselves as this amazing divine being here with all sorts of aspects of ourselves to make us who we are and to drive us for what we came here to do, right? So if there are aspects of who we are that we're denying ourselves, we're shortchanging our own life experience, and we're shortchanging everybody around us. So, shadow work or shadow play, it is so important. And, certainly I'm not saying that play is to make too much light of it, but just to allow people to jump into it, right? It's something that you can be enthusiastic about, and something that, yes, maybe you start off lighter and you go deeper and deeper rather than digging all the way to the bottom right off the bat. I don't know. It depends on the person, but it's so much better to start that exploration. And, if that's the word that helps people to dive in, then I guess that's what I kind of was digging into there. Like, it's nice to have something that encourages that exploration. So kind of like the cave people, not cave people, cave explorers. As they explore, you go deeper and deeper, and it gets darker and darker, but you bring your light. So it's a lot of fun, but it's a very important process of becoming who we are in this incarnation. So it's exciting.
Thanks, Karen. And it sounds like Val wants to go next. Go ahead.
Well, thanks everybody. I'm like, I write as I listen, and I've like 2 pages already. And I'm really grateful for people sharing their personal stories here, the practitioners. I'm also have seen schools where the practitioners will just want to be in the light and don't want to put their stuff out there and say, yeah, me too. And I got really clear. I've been studying brain science a lot. I've been doing brain spotting with a therapist. That's just remarkable. The last time I did it, the moon came in as an ally and blasted the left side of my brain with light as my brain decided to do some rewiring. I kind of just lost my train. I had too many thoughts come in all at once. But I'll get back to that. But one thing I'm really clear about is that I have certain people in my life, and especially glaring in my family members, where they're the same they were 40 years ago. They do like drink a lot, and they do carry a lot of anger, and the world's pretty black and white. It's pretty compartmentalized. And I'm realizing that, and so this brain science, this brain spotting, I've been studying brain, and that if you're not pushing, well, there's a big faction of us who just aren't maturing. And people who have shown up on this panel, who want to look at this, who want to do the work, who want to learn, it's really different. It's really amazing to me, like we're all really doing it. And Henry, when you said that you've reclaimed your curiosity, what I heard was innocence. Like there's a power of innocence that I think our country has lost it. I think a lot of the world has lost it. I do believe it's perhaps our greatest superpower. And I think that curiosity and innocence to say, oh, wow, this looks like an owl feather. It could help me see through the dark, but like what's over there and what's over there and wow, what's over here? And it's so awesome to have guides to do that with. And the shadow does seem to be what we want to avoid and run from because it just looks so scary. So I do want to read a poem, but in the last 18 months, I think 16 people have died in my life. 3 suicides from people I know, and then there's a 4th. A murder from the grocery store shooting near me of a friend. It just is I mean, 6 meth overdose, 6 since August 5th. And so I've been in trauma. I have not been doing great at times. I got really anxious this weekend and I got embarrassed about it because I could not settle down. And it was really hard to just let it be okay. It was just hard to drop into that. And one thing I posted on Facebook is a saying that I love, and it goes, you can't save your face and your ass at the same time. Thank you for laughing. Because a lot of people said, what does that mean? I don't get it. Well, you can't look good and ask for help. I mean, this work is messy. It's going to get messy and you're not going to look great, but you're going to look beautiful. Later I'll tell you about this journey I had this morning. But yeah, it's hard to see our way out when we're in it. And I've also had times in my life, especially younger, where I wished my emotions lived in drawers, and I just wanted to open the happiness drawer and the okay drawer. But I realized that they were limited if I didn't open the shit drawer, the hard drawer, the dark stuff. Then the happiness drawer wouldn't open fully. Like I didn't have this full self, like so many of you have talked about. But this is one of my books, Soar Ready, Medicine Poems for a Changing World. And this poem wanted to be heard this evening. Demons again. I was encircled again this morning in the basement of the house I'd built. The only way out of that crowd was to disintegrate through the floor, leaving my deflated skin a pile on the ground. I felt sad. You were the ones I should have been able to trust. Today, I unzipped your fur to find trembling 5-year-olds inside. I stepped over you and flew. Thanks.
Well, I was taking some notes on how I think about all these things. Yeah, and I appreciate bringing up just some of the context of how light and dark can really play into racism, systemic racism. So I'm thinking of the phrase of light and hidden in the shadows. So yeah, hidden in the shadows is what we're not seeing. When I think of shadow, I think of fear. So sometimes I hear people contrast fear and love, or fear and flow. I think of flow, like playful flow of dancing with. So to me, shadow, all of shadow is connected to fear. I think maybe that will hold for me, and that's true. So I'll see as we explore tonight if I see anything else. If anyone wants to bring up anything else about that. So I think of light as sort of like universe or spiritual energy, right? Soul energy flowing through me and each of us. And in terms of non-duality and all being connected, so all of our energies, of whether the part that's flowing through me right now in the physical body that I am on this plane, am I allowing that all to flow, is whatever the being of me, right? Am I in flow? Am I in dance? And the ways that I'm not, the ways that I've blocked that, and typically those things come from times I've felt scared or still feel scared. So that's where there's shadow here playing with me, with the light that flows through me too. Yeah, so I think that I include in light the paradox of my letting the light to flow through me or not getting in the way, and also like being at my edges in a way that's compassionate and then a raw edge at the same time. Yeah, shadow dancing of the ways that I'm not allowing light to flow through. The more I'm at the edge, the more that I'm willing to stretch, the more that I'm willing to open, even when I feel scared to breathe into that and to open. To me, that's also the light, to allowing more light to flow in, even if I'm not fully in the light, this light. And compassionately being with, so compassionately being with however I'm in shadow, even when I don't see it, loving me, knowing that it's here. And I so see a bunch of ways. And then whatever I don't yet see. So I just think, it's a paradox because I'm in an embodied experience. There's only so much of the light that's through me and where I am in the stage of being me now. So just being me and allowing light to flow through me the best that I can, the most that I can. To me, that's my opportunity and my journey. I don't know all of what light is, right? I only know the part of it that flows through me that I let myself recognize as light. Val, what you mentioned earlier about some people wanting to only be in the light, that one phrase that's used for that is spiritual bypassing, like aiming to connect with the light and refusing to see shadow. And I think that to be, really to be the light or in the light is to be with all of the light, whatever it is, and dancing with whatever it is, whatever is here. I'm looking back at my notes. So just examples of just little things that have shown up for me just in the call today, right? So I was running around doing things with my dog, right? So I had the thought of, I'm like a bad dog mommy because my dog wants to go see my partner and like, how do I do all this, right? That's my shadow, scared that I'm not doing something right or enough or taking care of blah, 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 right? Or that I text my partner to come in to play with my dog so my dog will get to see her. And then when she does come in, he's eating his food and he doesn't go play with her. I'm like, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad partner, right? I asked my partner to come in, I'm like, so all these layers, right? And then I'm like, so I think like I'm behind, all these things I haven't done, but then like, I'm here. Breathe. Okay, I'm here right now. And I let all these other things float. right? So these are ways that I then dance with all the things that are here. And then I can be more here and play with what's here and allow all the things and hold them, not even hold them, but be loose with them, right? So talk about like holding things spaciously, or not even holding, but dancing, the flow. So the more that I'm in flow with all that is, and so if light is through all kinds of living beings, we still eat each other. We still, if I eat a plant, right? Animals eat each other. I'm gonna eat an animal, right? It's how is that all light? It's something for me about flowing, being in the flow and dancing with whatever's here. Yeah, so that's my best awareness. And fear is what blocks the flow. Anyone else want to jump in now that we've all heard each other and say any other things?
I just wanted to add two things, and I know I probably didn't even try to identify light or define light and dark, but in my this one healing school I was in the 90s, we always said there's light as the life force, as this pulsing creation. We can't run away from it. That is light. And we used to say there's the light, everything is light, and then there's light that forgot it's the light. Like when I first was doing a healing on somebody who had cancer, I found this big, fat, dark thing sitting on her chest, which is where her cancer was. And oh my God, I kept trying to lift it off. I really wasn't able to in that moment. It really took, more than just me, but to realize that it too is light, is creation, is light, but it forgot its true nature. It forgets what it is. So my job as a healer at that point was to ask for many allies, but also to remind it of its true nature and show it what it is. And it will also often integrate or go back into source and not be this isolated, chaotic thing that's causing so much harm, like this ball of energy that's spun off and is doing so much harm, or in my mind says it's harm, because I even try not to judge at that level. I went to remove cancer from another woman one time and was talking to her psychically, and she grabbed my hand and said, "No, you can't remove it because I don't want it to pass on to my daughter and her daughter." And it had gone down generations to her. And she said, "No, it stops here. It does not move forward." So I can't judge that either. It was her saying, I'll heal, I'll take it on. But the other thing I wanted to say that I recently heard in a poetry reading is how poetry is a way to get to something that's psychically undigested. Isn't that freaking brilliant? So for me, going through 6 deaths in the last 7 weeks, it is not psychically digested. There is nothing digested about that. There's nothing digested about all this loss the last 18 months. But I can read, I can journey, or write, I can do my journey, I can come here, I can do things to help. It's going to take me a while. But I love that. I love that term, psychically undigested.
That's great. Go ahead if everyone else wants to jump in on the panel.
Yeah, I really love the things that you were saying, Laureli. I felt it was almost like a slightly out of body experience as I'm listening to you, which sometimes happens when I really don't know where I am. So as you were speaking, I didn't know where I was. And that was a really interesting experience. I haven't had that. I might have had that because I was doing taxes all day. Who knows? It could have been from that. The body has its own ways of healing. So as I'm listening to you, I felt that, and I may have misunderstood you. I hope I didn't. I felt that you weren't talking so much about shadow as you were talking about the living of life that is not so binary that things are shadow or light, or that even something can be in the shadow. Does that speak at all? I didn't feel it was sidestepping it, but I felt it was elevating how we can live our lives above the idea of how we can deal with the shadow. And so that made me feel like, oh, where am I? You know, it's kind of interesting because like I was really down over here with the shadow, you know. So and I really see now the danger there, of course, is spiritual bypassing. It's when you just want to elevate things so you don't have to deal with the mucky muck that Val is mentioning. But I think also we can have the best intentions and be down here and do our shadow work and forget that too in some sense is illusory. Not illusory as in not true, but illusory as in ephemeral, as in a temporary experience. So even light and shadow or doing shadow work is the dynamism of life. But my understanding from my mystical experiences of the divine is that there in that space, it's not even a space, I don't have a word for it, there is no dynamism there. There's just being, like a state of perhaps what I would describe as blissful and euphoric being. There's no shadow there because there's no dynamism, no contrast there. And so I really feel that shadow is something to honor. Like I used to teach a class called Feeding Your Shadow a Feast. And it's like, I don't really want to heal it out of existence, because I think it is an incredibly sacred part of our being. Whereas where I see shadow work is in that there are things that are so unconscious to us that if they were to become conscious, they would enrich and expand our lives, and they would perhaps allow us to be in the experience of healing and be in the experience of fulfilling ourselves. And why I use the word being in the experience is because I think that ultimately we are whole and healed, or not even healed, like before, just whole. But we can certainly be in the experience of not being whole, and then healing is required. Because I do believe, you know, that's my personal belief, that we're all divine and therefore, just perfect, but not perfect as in perfection, perfect as in whole. But then the experience that we're having, in which we then experience shadow, I think is not a mistake. I think it is meant to be. I think it is part of the sacred experience of being manifested beings. And I think what Carl Jung, when he invented this whole thing we're talking about by calling it shadow work, I think he introduced a beautiful area within which to play. And play can have tears in it, and play can have pain in it. Play is not just all happy, happy, happy. So I really feel that I've talked enough, and I should wrap it up and like pass off the microphone to the next person who is probably chomping at the bit to say something. Thank you.
It's great, Henry. I know Susie wants to go. Maybe I want to say just a little bit of maybe clarifying mine, because I wasn't all that grounded when I said it. And maybe if I think of light as flow and play, and it doesn't mean that nothing like bad happens, but we don't get caught in judging it as bad, right? So it's this flow of energy. And that to me, shadow maybe is fear. So it's locked, it's more rigid, it's not as able to flow. And light is not only the flow, it's also being with that edge of letting the dance enter some of where it's stuck, and compassionately being with that, not like judging that it's bad or judging it for being stuck, and letting that, like the light little tickle in, and the loosening, and the teasing out, and the welcoming of like that unfolding. Letting it open to its light. And I want to include too, though, that somehow light through me in a physical body, like I'm in a physical body. So while I'm in a physical body, I may have feelings about things that arise. To me, the shadow is like getting stuck in them or caught in them. And then the flow of the feelings too is part of the light. So it doesn't mean like I don't feel angry or I don't feel sad, or I have particular definitions of anger. So so there's a little bit more grounded of what I meant. Go ahead, Susie.
Well, again, I'm going to ride in on Henry's coattails. when they said about living life. I feel that shadow and light are a part of life. And as you go through your day and live your life, then you get to again find that balance and to understand that life is so much more complex than just being in the light. And yeah, that's where we get into spiritual bypassing, where we think we're better than in that area. But we're all here. We're all sharing this experience. We're all bringing in this point of reality in this moment and sharing it and finding it in its complex in that. Oh, I just left my body too. Golly. Okay. Gotta find my word. Um, but sharing this point in time, and all of our perspectives are going to be slightly different, but that's the shadow too. It's like what does the shadow, one shadow thing is not necessarily such a shadow thing for somebody else. And so for me, yeah, it is living one's life to the fullest and embracing it and embracing our experience. And that's, I think, where I'm going to be going this winter. Okay, thanks y'all for giving me so much to think about.
Yeah, we like create so much opening and material for us to play with when we're on panels too. And I wanted to clarify too, if you're interested in asking a question of the panel, it does not have to do with shadow. Chances are, because it's our theme and we're all present to it, we'll integrate that in the answer somehow. You can ask a question. Go ahead, Karen.
I thought I was muted. I went to unmute myself and I was like, oh. So I wanted to add in two things, just kind of almost clarifiers to build upon what's been said. But, you know, shadow is so subjective. What is shadow to me might not be shadow to Henry. And what is shadow to Henry may not be to Val. And, you know, and it goes on, right? So it's a very subjective thing. And I think, you know, spiritual bypassing has been thrown around a lot lately. And that unfortunately is something that we're really seeing in the meta world right now. And so it's almost like an invitation to look at what triggers you and then figure out the why, rather than saying, oh, that triggers me. I don't want to look at that. I don't want, you know, it's like that shying away. It's almost like that trigger has the potential to illuminate something that you aren't willing to look at. And that in and of itself is shadow. And then why are you not willing to look at that? Is it something from your childhood? Is it something from another lifetime? Is it something that, you know, has been projected on you that you've taken on? But until you can look at it and illuminate it and understand it and then integrate it or accept it, it's going to stay in that hidden. And then to Laureli's point, it creates that stuck feeling, right? You can't move past certain things. You can't get over certain things because you're not willing to look at where things need to potentially be addressed or potentially healed or whatever it is, right? You need to be able to see it. So just wanted to add that in.
I have something to say too, and I really love what's happening right now because I feel like we're all shifting in and out of what our personal experience is in regard to all of this. And I'm going in and out of it myself and just listening and watching and paying attention to all of it. And I love what you said about the triggers, Karen, because I feel the same way. There's, I'm actually being triggered by spiritual bypassing because I think I was a person who potentially did that, but I don't want to be judged for it because that's a shadow in our society and maybe in this, you know, the spiritual community that, you know, if I'm looking into that spiritual community now, I might feel the same way, like be careful of this, watch for it and nurture somebody into paying attention to it. But at the same time, I don't want to look back and say, oh, well, I've been there, done that, you know, or, Do you see what I'm saying? Like, we've just introduced in the healing community, we've introduced this topic of spiritual bypassing, and it is a shadow that either we have all experienced or we're all waiting to avoid in some way, if that makes sense. So this is where, you know, in my, and I want to point to this because for those of you who are listening, who aren't on the panel, you know, when I was in my yoga trainings, there were moments where I felt, and Karen, I think you mentioned the word, well, I guess my word would be like a contraction and a question. Like, I'm not quite sure I understand that. And this desire to want to know more, and being willing and brave enough to raise my hand and say, can you talk more about that? And then it being sideswiped in some kind of way by these teachers who were up there, you know, being paid really, really well to teach me about these things. And really what those moments were the desire to know more about what's coming in our future. Like I see some of these shadowy places, you know, because there is a part of our future that's in the shadow right now. None of us really know exactly what's going to happen. So we're in question, and we are in that place of curiosity and inquiry and wondering. And can we be just as willing to look into our forward space as much as our backward space, or our, I'm going to even say like, a more elevated space, instead of hanging out in these, instead of maybe, I'm trying to figure out how to speak this, assuming that where we are right now is in a shadow and that we can't come out of it in some way. And being willing to move forward with the energetics that are taking us there. So even Susy mentioned, you know, riding on the coattail, these waves, you know, there's a wave happening right now, and where are we going with it? So, and I feel like, even though I might be saying these things that, and hopefully they're making sense, but they're tying into all the pieces and the parts of the conversations that have already happened with you guys. And, you know, how can we be in all of it with a space of being willing to be present with the love that surrounds us anyway? So, you know, Susy, I this is one thing that I wanted to point out to you in my own clarification, that, you know, I say, and I've been talking about loving things for several years now, and I've never had cancer, so I don't know what it's like to hear from somebody, you know, to love your cancer. But the one time that it came up in another panel, my guides clarified with me later that it's less about like, you know, because we have an idea of what love is, you know, we take something and we rock it into into this like, oh, I love you kind of thing. But they said it's an infusion. We infuse things with love. So, and a lot of what I'm talking about is personal. I'm talking about self-hatred in me. I'm talking about the pain that I feel because of how other people's pain has been projected onto me and compressed me. So I infuse me with love. I infuse all the pain in my heart with love. And the more that I infuse all these pockets and shadowy places in me, then I infuse the rest of my environment in the world with that as well. And so that's all it really means to me to love something, because as soon as I start hating it, like Val said, I have forgotten the true capacity of how love can actually heal something. Now I'm sweating, so I'm going to let somebody else go.
I know Val you had your hand up, and Susy wants to say something. And so we don't have any questions in line yet. So I'm going to let us keep talking. And if someone wants to ask a question, or if you've paid to ask a question, please let me know in the chat, and we will transition to answering questions. Go ahead, Val, and then Susy.
Yeah, wow, thanks. Wow, Lisa, that was freaking awesome. One thing I wanted to share was I was remembering Shakti Gawain. Remember Shakti Gawain? Shakti Gawain came up with these positive affirmations to change your life. And it really rocked the world and it changed a lot of lives. And probably mid 90s, I was in a healing school in Michigan where we were doing a lot of shadow work. We were studying really Barbara Brennan's work primarily, but doing deep dive, deep energy work. And so I went to see Shakti Gawain. It was a big festival, and I was, we were really doing a lot of shadow work. And Shakti, so like Marianne Williamson and all these visionaries came out really dressed, really sharp, really together. Well, Shakti walks out a little wrinkled, a little not so put together. And she just stood in front of that packed house and she said, do your work, do your work, do your work. And somebody raised their hand and said, what about all those books, about all the positive affirmations? And she said, I was a little naive. I was pretty young. Do your work, do your work, do your work. And I went, yes. And she said, one person agrees with me. Because there was a gasp. People were like devastated. But she said, it's just not it. It's a piece of it. It's not bad, but it's not it. Like I told you, it was it. And she just stood there, oh my God, it melted my heart. She was so real. She just was there and said, do it. Go into that shadow and do your work. I was also, I think it was Henry who said about feasting it, which made me really happy. And I heard this story about, there was a shamanic gathering in California and wildfire broke out. And people were at a retreat center. And this wildfire was coming over the mountain towards them. And all the communities around them were evacuating and going there as the safest place to go. And the shaman who was leading the retreat asked the people the landlords, he said, we have to build a bonfire, a big fire. And they said, are you crazy? Everything's burning down. You cannot have a fire. He said, we have to have a fire. And they finally agreed. And he built a big fire. And he had everybody dance around it and give food and water and praise it and just celebrate and feast this fire. And after they did this for a while, the wildfires went out. So I just love the idea. There was also there's a story of the moon god in Egypt where a pharaoh's daughter who was really sick believed that her way to health was to feast the disease and celebrate the disease, like Susy was talking about her cancer. But and then the other thing is, I was wanting to maybe offer a turn to the conversation that Lisa just really was diving into about most of us, I believe, feel like our country and this world is living under a great, great, great shadow. And there's a lot of people struggling with so many things right now. And I was wondering if we could turn our conversation that way a little bit, maybe, if you were interested in that.
Anyway, we got Susy and then Henry.
I'm game for that, Val, but I also wanted to clarify with Lisa. When somebody asked me to love the cancer, I was not totally devoid of love at the time. I sent love out to even the radiation I went through and the chemo and all of this stuff. So there was love involved. And in fact, I believe that was that was a major component in me getting through it. It was the cancer itself. And I appreciate the shift, that difference in of perspective. It helps me. And the story about the woman who said she had to stop the cancer so it wouldn't go to their to her daughters. And that's a lot of the attitude I had too, because, they did the genetic testing and it all tested negative. And I still said, I have to change the end of this story. And therefore, I believe I'm changing those genetics and how it affects my offspring. And so it's, I don't think being, talking about being selective about what I love and what I can't love. It was more important for me to love myself and to love what was being done to help me to get through it. So I hope that clarified. I don't want to diminish anything that anybody's saying here because it's all vastly important. That shadow work includes so much of this experience that we're calling a physical experience right now, and it is just this one point in time. But yeah, Val, we could also go look and see what kind of shadow the country is going through. But it's Henry's turn. Thanks.
So keep seeing more thumbs up in the audience. Just wanted to let you all know that's happening.
Cool.
Go ahead, Henry.
I don't trust that I can talk about what the country is going through. But that might be my shadow work. As a German, born, raised, educated in Germany, I have my perspective is a little bit different. And there are a lot of things I don't accept because I know from experience that they don't have to be accepted. Like, for example, that we don't have universal health care because Germany has had universal health care my whole life. So just as an example, so for me, that might not be the thing that I can talk about, but I'd love to learn and I'd love to transform things. As we're talking about the shadow, what occurs for me is that with my clients, almost all of the time, there's some shadow work needed. And this is the most difficult for them because they want me to just help them come up with a regimen or tools or practices that fix something, that should make it go away or transform it in some way, and certainly not stay the way it is. And that makes so much sense to me. There's a lot of things for me that I want to just transform and not have them stay the way they are. And what I found in the many years that I've been doing this work is that you kind of can't get around putting your arms around whatever it is that you want to change. That's been my experience. I don't want to say it like an absolute because that's kind of intolerant and I certainly don't feel that way. But I just find that the hardest thing is to love something you want to get rid of. And it is the most effective way to transform it. Because love, nothing is as transformative as love. In fact, perhaps that's the reason for love existing, because it's a transformative agent. And so when I'm saying to a client, this thing about yourself that you don't love, what would it be like to love that? They're just like, no way. If I were to love that, what do I need you for? And I get it. And I'm just thinking about what am I not loving? So, and I've mentioned this before. I have some slight narcissistic tendencies. My mom was one, my brother is one. I have a little bit of it myself, which usually in terms of narcissistic injury, but also in terms of how I talk too much, I think, and too long, and just all this stuff to struggle, and I'm too concerned with my feelings and too concerned with feeling hurt. Like I sometimes misunderstand people, thinking they've slighted me, and they haven't, and maybe they have, but even if they have, so what? It's like not the end of the world, and no. And if I have to say to myself, oh, I should love all these things, then of course, what I'm immediately running up against is, no, I want to get rid of these things. I want to fix them. So from experience, I know that it's counterintuitive to want to transform something by allowing it to be what it is and meeting it with love. And yet, oddly enough, that is, in my experience, how it has worked. So when people want me to fix something for them, and they get frustrated with me, that I'm saying instead, go into it, listen to it, let it tell you what it needs, rather than shutting it down and locking it up in the cellar and putting it in chains. I understand that they're resisting. I resist too. And yet this is the power of shadow work as far as I have seen. So again, I don't want to come across as that I know how it is, and if anyone else disagrees, then they're wrong. This is the slice of it. That's my understanding of it. So if there's a resistance, that's totally fine. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not still a good thing to do.
Thank you, Henry. I love that. And I love your honesty. Because the last thing that you said was about resistance. And there have been moments when I've been working as a client with a healer or even a friend or something like that, who's pointing out my resistance as if I shouldn't be resistant. And it makes me feel uncomfortable and like I'm doing something wrong. But, my guides have worked very diligent with me on the importance of growth and healing happening on its own time. And that, maybe I think somebody might have touched on it after I talked about the spiritual bypassing, that, we're all right on time. We're all just right on time. So, and I guess I'm laughing because I see myself going like, here's my shadow, look at it, look at it, look at it. And then I don't see anything. And it's like, well, it's because, like we protect ourselves from things for a reason. And that, if we're willing and we keep sort of like saying, okay, there it is. Okay, there it is. Okay, there it is. Then the answers come and our growth will happen. But I also am under the impression that as human beings, we're very, we want to grow and heal. And so this idea of morphing that, my guides gave me that word and they've used that terminology with me for a couple of years now. And it's challenging to describe because, it's sort of like based off the idea that the human soul is meant to grow, but here we are like kind of incapacitated in a certain way in these human bodies that contain our spirit, and then we have our damages and our, thoughts about them, and all of that stuff is like shrinking our spirit, and our spirit just wants to fly and be free in all of it, but how? And so here we are talking about it.
I'm just checking again. I don't think anyone yet has said they want to ask a question. So we're continuing on with our discussion. Yeah, if anyone wants to ask a question, let us know. All right, well, I'll leap in, Val, to some of what's going on. I feel scared. It's not fully worked through. Stories. I should work this out and save for audiences first. And I'll leap in and I want all your feedback. So the two topics, I was first thinking about the phrase Black Lives Matter and then the phrase All Lives Matter. And then I realized I've also been thinking about this in terms of the virus. And I don't know if people talk about it as like third dimension or third plane and fifth dimension. So to me, right, so just so establishing context, right? So Black Lives Matter is facing what's here now. To me, that's facing shadow. And All Lives Matter is not facing. And I think we could define it as an aspect of spiritual bypassing. It's focusing on the light. This panel wasn't meant to be focused on spiritual bypassing, but I guess avoidance of shadow, right? We wind ourselves here. And while to me, there's some truth in all lives matter because all lives do matter. And we're not living in a way where we treat all lives as mattering. So it's not true. It's avoidance of how it is now. And this is controversial in the metaphysical community of like, I chose to get vaccinated. I choose to do all kinds of alternative care of myself to stay healthy. When I've started to get some symptoms of things over the last year and a half, I immediately do alternative things. I chose to get vaccinated for me and for others. And some people in our community have, and I'm not around this much, so I might not speak it very well, but have talked about like fifth dimension, and that people are more enlightened, and that if they're so enlightened that they won't get COVID, and that if we all would just enlighten, then COVID would go away. And so to me, that's also a form of spiritual bypassing and refusing to face the shadow of how things really are. And so I was defining light as like the dancing with what is, right? Even, for example, that we might kill each other, eat each other, right? And so for me, something might have some truth. And I think maybe I do sort of believe in some ways, if I'm more enlightened, if I'm more conscious, if I allow light to flow through me more, maybe I wouldn't get sick in some ways. I certainly believe it about some things of my life, like getting colds, and maybe it's true about other things too. So for both, all lives matter, and that I wouldn't be sick if I'm really in love and I allow light to fully flow through me. While there might be truth here, do I embody this? Do I only speak it? Do I not actually walk it, right? So am I walking the talk? Am I embodied this concept? And then is it of service? Is that concept of service? So even if both of those statements have some truth, that all lives really do matter, right? And that if I'm more conscious and more enlightened, I might not be ill. Am I focused on me and what's selfish and just what's good for me? Am I focused on what's here and what's happening where I am? And I see so many paradoxes in here. So for me, the statement all lives matter is focusing on selfishness and what I want and climbing on other people to try to have more of what I want, if I were to say that phrase. And there's just a paradox I see here too, is I think, and the idea of karma came up for me here too. I feel like the whole idea of spiritual bypassing and like karma, and the idea of like, I guess like payback, or that there's real practical harm if I do something that's not good right now. And then there's the idea that I can't avoid the harm that I cause, like it follows around with me. But I'm kind of leaping topics. Let me come back to. So I asked the question, is there truth? Am I embodying the truth? And is the idea of following this truth of service? I believe that if I'm interacting with someone where the interaction doesn't feel good to me, I'm not in flow, I'm not in love, I'm not in this dance, I might let that person go. I might not focus on being of service to that person in this moment. And at the same time, am I choosing, am I allowing energy to flow through me that allows me to know what is of service? Am I really in flow of the energy that's through me? Or am I locked in fear, in shadow, and I'm saying these things that might have truth that actually aren't true in the wholeness? So this is my attempt to speak to what's happening in our country. Yes, I know Henry's got their hand up. Anyone? Go ahead, Henry.
Well, I always love listening to you, because your perspective is always so interesting, so intriguing to me. We all have that. I'm pretty sure that some people we just totally agree with, and other people just introduce new things to us. And I just feel like when I listen to you, it's somehow just a little bit different. And I just like, oh, what am I hearing? Oh, this is so interesting. And I'm not even sure what you mean, that I know what you mean, but I know how I get inspired. So I just had to say that. So, when you talk about all lives matter, and how that is a form of not doing the shadow work, or it just made me think, I wonder if spiritual bypassing, if its definition is not doing shadow work. And so, yeah, so, you know, I'm posing it as a question, and I think it's an interesting one. I grew up with a Japanese teaching, Sechonoye, and you don't even need to remember what I just said. It's just, you know, it was wonderful, and it was very transcendent. It was a monotheism, very mono. Just it believed that all there is God, and everything else is illusion, which we find a lot of that in Hinduism as well, in certain branches of Hinduism like Brahmanism. And so it taught me to always transcend everything. So literally, like, oh, my dad dies, I'm 14 and a half years old. I'm transcending that. He's on to his next journey. And I even have a dream of him swimming in the ocean, which he loved so much. And I'm letting go. And then, oh, my mom dies when I'm 18. Oh, okay, well, you know, my mom is this wonderful spirit being, a medium and a mystic herself. So she's on to her next journey. And I'm almost killed in an accident when I'm 8. And really, literally, miracle that I survived. Oh, well, that's, you know, I decided to stay. And now, you know, I there's so much more value in my life because I am so present to how I could have lost my life. And and all of that caused for me to somehow keep life at arm's length. Not that these things weren't true in some sense. They probably were, and I believe they are. And it's a way of being with life. And that, you know, good for me that I had that. And at the same time, life was slightly at a remove, and sometimes more than that, which is not a bad thing. You know, why not? You know, I think it's legitimate to live a life at a remove. But at some point I decided I don't want that. I want to like be in the messy, in the all of it, in the deliciousness and in the craziness and in the darkness. I just want to, because it's all available. It's sort of like, I don't just want to go to Disney World. You know, I also like want to go into the Everglades, you know, and so I don't see shadow as, I don't know, like a dungeon, even though I mentioned a cellar earlier. I see it more as this profound contrast. And so now that's a very privileged viewpoint, because when you are a person of color in America, this delicious contrast does not feel like contrast. It just feels like a lot of pain and a lot of rage and a lot of injustice. And to say in a moment like that, well, you know, you're just experiencing a lot of shadow, good for you, I think is misusing that, and it's misunderstanding that. And then on the other hand, okay, now here we have shadow again, and shadow is a good thing, and so now that's a good thing as well. So I think that when we talk about shadow, we can never get to a point of that something is better off to not have existed. But then I think there's a big difference between something having existed and for how long something has existed. So a wonderful enlightened friend of mine said to me, it's okay for you to be angry. I would get very angry. It's just a matter of, you know, how long are you angry? Are you going to be angry for a day, for an hour? Or if you've been triggered by someone and then you scream back at them, what if you're angry for a split second? And completely honor that and acknowledge that, but you don't have to do it so long that you then end up perpetuating the pain. So why am I bringing that up is that it's complex, it's complicated. And I think that I love shadow work, and I love that shadow exists, and I embrace shadow. And at the same time, I don't want it to go on and on and on and on for people like people of color in the United States. It's going on and on and on, hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's still there. And I don't know if you can see, like my lips are getting tight because I'm starting to feel angry, which is why I don't want here I'm talking about it, not necessarily wanting to talk about it, because I get very triggered by injustice, and I don't like this injustice at all. So I'm going to end what I'm saying here by saying I hold us all in love and light. There's much work to do.
Yeah, thank you. And Lisa's coming back. She just got back in. Yeah, thank you. I feel like I just did when I was sharing, I didn't describe as much of the harm that's done by the spiritual bypassing as I might have in my examples. All right, Susie, I think is next. Yeah.
Thanks. So, okay, good. I'm glad. I was like, Lisa's gone. Oh man, I'm glad you're here. Not that I'm saying anything directly to you, but it's like you've contributed so much. But we're talking about all of this Black lives versus all lives, uh, spiritual bypassing. And for me, the word accountability comes through that what we do and what we say, these accounts are being called in, that we need to be accountable for our actions, and some people are and some people aren't. I believe that's what kind of what spiritual bypassing is about, is somebody is not being accountable. I did this because this is a lesson for you. Bull. And it's having accountability. You could call it karma, you can call it consequences. But part of shadow work, I feel, is looking at the karma, looking at the consequences, looking at what you have done or what has been done to you, and seeing those consequences, whether you resist it, whether you go with it, whether you hang on to it, whether you let it go, whether you cut somebody off from being toxic or whatever. uh, it's accountability, and setting these boundaries or releasing boundaries that don't need to be there. But that's been for me an overarching concept, accountability, with watching what's going on and how things are going down to people who have, I sit there, I can't get cocky and said, well, they're getting exactly what they deserve, because it is making me judgmental. And I've also got to continue to examine my responses. So, and how I'm sitting there, it's very tempting to sit there and watch previous people who have been in the spotlight and like sitting there with the popcorn and watching their lives crumble. It's not taking joy in it. It's learning from there. What is that? I will say things like, I am grateful to learn from other people's mistakes, because God knows I don't have time enough in this lifetime to learn them all on my own. So it's just looking and seeing their experience and seeing how I need to shift my perceptions. Like with systemic racism, I grew up in Texas, and I did. I lived in a pretty homogenous neighborhood. It was amazing that we had one person that we knew that was of color, or that we had a particular, people of color at our school that we went to. And so being able to open up to that and examining my own really deeply entrenched attitudes that I thought was just the way it was done, and then seeing, ah, that's how it's negatively affecting someone else. So making those changes in my life right now, and supporting people as best I can in the way I can. For me, that's just beginning to do accountability, like when Lorelei has. Um, oh, I was just listening to our interview, and you were talking about the rent du Amish. I forgot what it was, but it was to help. You'll give me the right name right now, I know.
Real rent Duwamish. It's so that we can pay rent for the ancestral lands of the Duwamish people that we are on, that we and our ancestors stole from them. Yeah.
Yeah, so that sort of thing to help heal whatever we can. I I I don't know when it will end. I don't know when we can call all the accounts paid off, because I don't know if they will be. I don't know, but I feel that doing our part to be accountable not only to ourselves but to others, and to live those lives that that we can leave saying, okay, I did my best. Even then, I feel kind of twitchy about that. So it's, yeah, accountability. That's what it all
I'm
boils
gonna
down to for
jump
me
in
right
and
now.
say there's doing our best, and at the same time, this paradox, all paradox. If all we do is shadow, and we face shadow, and we force and we push, and that's actually shadow, and that's being caught in the stuckness and the fear. And yeah, so this paradox of how do we face shadow, and how do we be in flow, and how we face shadow, how we be with shadow and love what's here, and love the messiness too. Someone else wanted to go. Val, Val, go ahead.
I didn't know if Karen was jumping in or if I should. Were you ready? No. Yeah, again, I appreciate being here because it feels like being here is the work, is the maturing, is the showing up. And I'm really grateful for what I'm hearing us bring so much gift and wisdom and practice. And I'm hearing us say, I don't know, so often that it makes me so happy, because that is the light, because we don't have to, like Lisa said, we don't have to hold up. I don't know if you use those words, but that's what I felt, that we don't have to hold up a facade, and like Shakti Goin on stage that day. And sometimes my heart breaks so often, and I love Susy just saying, when will we be paid up? Because I've wondered, are we paying for the sins of our grandfathers, or somebody's? And yeah, I was in a sweat lodge one time, all sun dancers, all older guys, a couple women, and I was a guest there. Somebody was getting a healing there and really wanted me there as a support person, and there was a lot of animosity towards people my color, and women kind of too, but they even had children there who looked at the water pourer, the medicine man, and said, "Daddy, there's white people here." I'm thinking, oh my God, you guys are going to struggle in this world if you're othering people. But during the sweat lodge, I think it was a little hostile of a lodge. Usually a sweat lodge, you start with 7 stones, and I think he started with 28 and then kept going. Like, it was a hostile lodge, and it was over 90 degrees outside already. And but he kept putting down white people and talking about how we've stolen everything and ruined everything. And I finally just asked to speak, Matakuya, yes, and I didn't know what to say. So I started into one of my poems. And I said, in the lodge, I said, I was born to this land. I marry willows and bear children each spring. Because I didn't know what else to say, but I had to speak. And what I was trying to say was that at some point, I get to be born here and hear the land and the way the land speaks, and not be told when the land, like I grew up a little Catholic girl, but when I would walk in the woods, these stones would say, "Hey, pick me up, carry me. Oh, here, leave me over here." Like, the world just talked to me so much. And some people would say, I'm supposed to put my fingers in my ears and say, la, 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 you can't talk to me. I'm Catholic. I don't get to do this. I'm going to be told I'm appropriating or something, that I don't get to pray this way. And so I've had to find my way into honoring the voices I hear and the way the prayers come in. I don't know what this has to do with what we're talking about, but it's just what I'm moved to share. I have a tree outside. Her name is Cleopatra, and she's a catalpa tree. And I've made her into a prayer tree. And she's just covered with prayer ties with words on them. She is so beautiful. And a couple years ago, I put out on Facebook and out into the world that I was, it may have been last year, I don't remember. Usually I would do this in ceremony with a group, but for some reason I was going to be doing it myself. And so I asked people for their prayers, and I was probably given 80 prayers or more. And when it was the day to do the prayer tree, it snowed about a foot, and I could not approach her. I couldn't get over there in the snow. So I waited a week or so, and finally it was a day and I could do it. And the tree said before I could start stripping the fabric and putting up the prayers, she said, get out that fabric you bought in Egypt and cut it. And I'm like, really, really, you want my Egyptian fabric? Okay. And she said, and cut the first piece really wide, 2 strips. And then she said, wrap my trunk first. And she kept chanting, first take care of the prayer, then take care of the prayers. First take care of the prayer, then take care of the prayers. And I was wrapping her, I realized that Cleopatra's was one of the images on the fabric, and that was her name, Cleopatra. So I really enjoyed that. But as I hung the prayer, it took me 2 days to write and hang the prayers of all the names. And I did shorthand, like Rosemary and her family, rather than naming the people. But I felt lighter and lighter and lighter as I put them out there. And I couldn't believe the burden I was carrying. Oh my gosh. They were not mine to carry, and I was carrying them. And I think I tend to do that a lot. But getting the prayers out of me and handing them off and putting them where I could see them, giving them to the tree. This year, I couldn't put them up until she was in full leaf bloom, till she was strong. I had to wait till she was strong. I can go out there and drum and smudge, but there was something about letting it go. And so I think I wanted to say all that because of practice and the word return, R-E-turn, return that. So I did a shamanic journey this morning, and in my journeys, I often, in shamanism, a lot of the Western shamanism, we talk about the lower world, upper world, middle world, and it's not like hell or like the dark side to go with the lower world. They're all equal. They're all the same. Just different information, different guides, different work, healing work. So I went down into the underworld, and I went really deep where I often go. And there's big crystals there, and there's a lot of big squarish rubinite kind of crystals, and a little river, and I sit there often. And this morning, they took me into the crystals and below them, and they started to shatter them and fracture them. And the word fractal came in, the word fracture came in, and they were showing me how to direct the light, like a spotlight in a way, or to catch mirrors. Like I look at reality a lot as our mirror, and I know that a lot of us think of that. And I write about the current situation as cracked mirrors, broken mirrors, mirrors with the silver backing scratched off. But today they were showing me how it's like that Leonard Cohen song that the breaks are how the light gets in. But they were showing me the fractures and the shattering, but how it was directing lights into all these different shadowy places and aspects. And so it's this, so I'm just thinking about practice. Like I do want to be able to love my unhealed places. I want to psychically digest and integrate. I know enough to not do this myself, to embrace this gift of asking for help. I know how to take and how to find the practices. Is it writing a poem? Is it putting up a prayer tie? But what helps me to keep coming back? In 12-step programs, they say, keep coming back, it works. But to me, that means keep coming back. Like I have to keep coming back and returning, and then return and shatter something else and let that crack a light and bring in more energy and integration. And I just really moved to follow that stream a little bit. Thank you.
I know, Lisa, I know you want to say something. I want to jump in and say something a moment first. That cultural appropriation is darn complex. And I think, yeah, probably we could look at whether things are in fear or in flow. And I just want to clarify. I don't know that we can pay back all that's happened. I don't know that that's possible. And I'm certainly going to say Black Lives Matter until I'm no longer participating in maintaining the systemic racism, and that the systemic racism that's here that we are continuing to propagate until it's healed sufficiently that maybe not every drop is gone, not wanting to get caught in the white supremacy of perfection, but then until so much of it is gone. Because until we really know and celebrate and honor and treat fairly Black lives, people of color lives, the thing to do is to face that and be with that and change that. Again, not in so harsh a way, doing that in flow, and yeah. So it's maybe being with what's here rather than going backwards. And someone else was making comments, maybe Val did earlier, someone did, about going forward, going back in some other more artful ways. So Lisa and then Henry.
Well, if I just want to say that in that sweat lodge, I went on to apologize for any harm my ancestors had done. I just wanted to put that out there too, to the best that I could. But no, thanks.
Right. Yeah. It's like, how do we honor and have separate spaces, and how do we meet each other and play together, and yeah, let our energies all be in flow. Yeah. Yeah, it's complex. And I had stuff come up in events recently too. All right, Lisa and Henry. Thanks, Val.
Well, I was inspired because of Val's story, and then of course yours, Laureli, too. I'm gonna go back to Val's, and then I'll see how far I go with it before I return to speaking to Laureli's a little bit. So before tonight's call, my guides reminded me, because they've told me before that the energy work that I do is called light refraction. So when Val started talking about that, I just started writing down all the words again. And for some reason I wrote refractioned. So, you know, and then the word fractals, and then the word light refraction, and how, you know, we can see and understand ourselves as human beings, as beings of light, and that we have been fractioned, you know. And I'm using these gestures because sometimes I don't, you know, I see it in my mind and I understand the word myself, but you know, the fractions of our light being, and that is hidden inside of us, and how when light, and I say when light shines on us, because that's been my experience with my guides. Like, they basically came in and they said, here we go. That's the basics. And I started to feel light come through my body, like enter in through, this is my left side, and it's where I consider my heart chakra-ish type area. And the more that the light entered my body, the more that I fought it as well. So as it came in, it was like all these pieces and parts of me that were resisting or retaliating because of my discomfort with experiencing love, And I'm pretty sure that most people feel that way, because we're talking about light and fractals and energetic frequencies that human beings exist as, but we don't know it, or we have forgotten, or we might even, I'm hearing the word plan, to attempt to disagree. I don't know, those are the words I'm hearing. I drew a picture, it's very small, but this is a person. And it's like you know, the way you described prayer, the prayer and the tree and everything, and then you described all these lights, and the way that you described it was morphing is basically like, here is the light of God inside of us, and it gets hidden by all these and bruised and covered by all these hard things that we experience. But when we remember who we are, our heart begins to grow and it begins to push out, kind of like you just described. But the morphing mind part of it is, as the heart begins to grow upward and grow outward, it starts to reinvent our story in a way. So I just wanted to like say that's it. When you described your prayers and how, you know, you also even said, you know, I'm basically just trying to validate for you in a way, like, why am I talking about this? I don't know, but it ties together my understanding of everything that we're really talking about, and how, for me, if I can just almost, I'm hearing the word convolute it a little bit down to the basics of light frequency, not light as in white and dark as in black, but frequencies. So a slow wave versus a fast wave, because a fast wave is like the light that's shining on me right now. And a slow wave is going to be like a candle, maybe like a small fire, versus the sun. You know, and I think there's a period at the end of all of that, like, just that's the end. But in regard to what Laureli was saying, you know, I personally find the difficulties of our planet and our country so difficult to deal with on such a wide spectrum, that all I can do is deal with it in here. Now, not everybody's like that, because I have people that I work with, you know, and I live in Montana, so it's a little bit more of it's just a different place than having lived on the West Coast, because I did spend a lot of years out too. But there's a woman who feels very driven to be a huge activist in her community. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also nothing wrong with me not feeling driven to be that active in my community in that way, because I'm active in my community, deep in my cells, and all the people that I interact with, I'm having an impact on, with no words that need to even be spoken. And throughout that process, the city that I live in is growing and it's changing. And I was born here, and I really didn't grow up with a lot of people of color around me. So I didn't have the exposure to what we're talking about until I lived in California and Oregon and became maybe kind of comfortable with it. And then it started, all of the conversations started coming up, and I started growing up and started realizing this was an issue. And how was I a part of it? This city is growing, and there are more people of color.
You cut out. You said, how am I
a part of this? How am I a part of what's happening in our country in terms of racism? And how do I participate? Because basically I'm saying that I sort of grew up not exposed to it. So how am I a part of the problem? And it's a real question for me, because I started to really look at, well, how do I behave when I'm around people of color? And I started inquiring about it. And then I also started dreaming about people of color. And there was no fear in that, but because I'm an empath and psychic to it all, I started to wonder, these people are going to come into my life soon, and they have, and they are. And my favorite thing about it is that I'm developing friendships with people of color that I never even imagined before. And I get to experience just friendships with people as a result of it. Just so happens that they're people of color. So anyway, that's all I really wanted to add. And I don't know what it means, other than maybe somebody else out there is kind of, wondering the same things, I guess, in that regard. Thank you, though, everybody listening.
I think various of us grew up in bubbles of privilege or benefits, different words for it, and we didn't have to see. And then at some point our eyes opened, and our eyes are still opening.
Didn't have to, and didn't, like, when I look back at my life, I was just this little girl living in a small town. That's it. I wasn't privileged because I was a little girl growing up in a small town. And so I just want to
it's a much bigger conversation.
Well, sure, but my point is just to bring to the conversation that as an individual that wasn't exposed to all of this until I grew up and started paying attention. I'm more curious and interested in seeing where it's going. I'm more curious and interested in seeing where it's going than I would have been had I had a different life.
I hope it's okay with you. I want to say, just so this is in the space of the recording.
Yes.
I had the feeling too that I wasn't exposed to various things as a kid at various points. I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn, so in some ways I was, but in believing that I was ignorant and unaware of something doesn't mean that I wasn't exposed to it. I just couldn't see it. So like I grew up mostly in a group of white people that took advantages and received the advantages that they had. And I was raised to not see the harm I was causing to others in the way that things were not fair. And a lot of brown and black people were hidden and made to not be visible. And that's why I didn't see it. So I just wanted to have it in the space that it's not that we weren't exposed. We simply weren't aware that we were exposed. Yeah. Thanks for letting me say that. Go ahead. I think, yes, we have Henry and then Karen.
I just love what you just said, Laureli, and you have such a gentle way of talking about these things. I really admire that. And honestly, I don't mean to compliment you. It just happens. I'm just always like yeah. I'm gonna shut up about it now. Okay. So this panel is called Shadow Play, and it is about shadow work. And it's not surprising that shadow comes up, because I really have a very strong sense that shadow is coming up here. And I right away earlier when I was talking, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't part of that. When I was saying, I cannot comment on that. So, so as I'm listening to you, Val, I felt like the share had two parts. And the second part about the tree, and the first part about an experience in a lodge. And I didn't see that they were related, and they may very well be related. I didn't see that. And sort of like my heart just hurt so much in this first part, because of what it brought up for me was that this idea of when is it enough? And it makes me think of something that my husband has said to me once years ago, when I was expressing my anguish over how women are mistreated. And he was saying, this is just not on me. I'm not that kind of person, and I've never done that, and I never will do that. And in the last panel, I said, yeah, so what there was for him to do is become an ally, because you can't be a bystander when bad things are happening. When people are made to suffer, then we can't be bystanders saying, well, I didn't do anything to cause it. Like I could say, I'm not even from this country. I'm from Germany. Like in Germany, we don't treat people of color as badly as Americans do. So I'm like even doubly innocent, right? But I'm in this country, whether, and this is indisputable, and this conversation is going on here, and the difficulties are occurring here. And so when somebody pointed out to me that I had a really antiquated view, when I said, well, I'm just colorblind. Well, guess what? I really actually was. And then when this person said that to me, then I had to do the shadow work to recognize that that's not enough. That's not good enough. Being colorblind is also privilege. I have the privilege to not see a person's color if they're not white. Good on me, except that this doesn't change the situation. Or for me to say, I'm not even from here. I didn't cause this problem at all. And my forebears in my family didn't cause this problem. That also doesn't address the situation. And it's kind of irrelevant. This is what I've had to discover, that it's kind of irrelevant. And honestly, I didn't even want to talk about this. I was just shutting down, and I was like, when is it ever enough? And I'm just not, I have nothing to say about this. And I just started getting really sad and kind of just shut down. And then I'm like, that's not okay with me either. I'm not going to be shut down. I'm going to be courageous, and I'm going to speak. And what it makes me think of is my brother abused me when we were children, and he abused me well into adulthood. And he, at some point, did it less, but I still had the pain of that. And he said, this is just ancient history. And it wasn't. It wasn't ancient history. What I needed a genuine apology, and I needed not a blanket apology, but I needed a talking about, here is what you did, and here's him saying, here's what I did, and here's what I understand it did to you, and this is what I apologize for, and this is what I feel remorse about, and this is what I promise to do better. And those are the ingredients necessary for healing, and we don't have them present today in the American culture and many other cultures. That level of healing has not occurred. We're still in a place in between. And I think it's not going to be enough until we make it enough with our reparations, with our becoming conscious of what the situation is, with our becoming active allies. This is what it takes to make it enough. And I was like, yeah, but I'm just putting love into the world, and that's the job I'm doing. And it's like, when you see a child drowning in a river, you don't say, I'm putting love into the world and that's the job I'm doing. No, you maybe would jump into the river and save the child. And there's different ways of jumping into the river. But I think some kind of jumping into the river has to occur. And just to say, and this is me, this is how I feel, this is what I'm contributing, just to say I'm putting love into the world while that child is drowning, I don't think it's enough. We can do that once things have been healed sufficiently, like Laureli was saying. We can do it at that time. But in the meantime, listen, for me, the hardest part was that once I became aware of what whiteness is, and once I began to study whiteness culture, I experienced a strong time of self-loathing for being white. And this did not feel good. And I knew that this is what I had to move through without excuses or without explanations of how I didn't deserve that. To just be with. That was the shadow work that I had to do. And this is so interesting. It comes back to shadow work. That's what I had to do. And until I did that, I felt that I was not able to be with what's going on. And I'm still not able to be with what's going on in many ways. It's like somebody else said, shadow work, that I think, Karen, shadow work goes on and on and on and on. And injustice and cruelty and brutality and murder is happening right now to people of color, right now during this panel. Likely someone got hurt for the color of their skin because it wasn't white. So it's all very present. It's very now. And it's the time when we say, well, when is it enough, is probably decades from now, decades, way past my own life. So that's what I felt I had to say in order to be truthful or faithful to the subject matter, and to be faithful to myself as a divine being, which I know all of us are, to not shut down and say, I'm not going to touch this for fear of saying the wrong thing. Know that I'm coming from love, and know that I'm deeply and profoundly committed to justice, and especially to justice for people of color. Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
That's great. I'm taking the privilege of running the panel, but I'm going to jump in and say a bunch of other things. Someone else's work that I've read is about ending racism in this generation. And if we believe we can, that's the only way we can do it. And so just like we didn't have phones and now we're so addicted to phones and phones are everywhere and so integrated, that happened in about, 20 years or less. And so, yeah, we can make big change in a short time. Great, Karen.
So first, I want to thank you, Henry, for speaking up and sharing that, because I've also shut down for this conversation and struggled to find the right words. And that analogy of the child drowning and being able to say, oh, but I'm putting love into the world, like that was just such a beautiful way of expressing. And I guess that's kind of where I truly am stuck. And I don't know, like I do my part, but, is that enough? Is there more I could be doing? I truly don't know. And it's, in a way, it's good to be in question and to be aware. And so I just, honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I grew up in New Jersey. I'm 45 minutes outside of New York. I've had a very mixed upbringing. I've lived in San Diego. I've lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and now I'm back in New Jersey. And so there's been a lot of changes in who I've been around and the experiences that I've had. And I don't know when it's enough. I don't know what is enough. I don't know who would be the judge of it. I don't know how we know. Like, it's almost like there's so many questions. And I think that's part of the beauty of this life, and tying it back to shadow work. And, there's that dance. You can't live too much in the shadow work. You can't live too much in the reparations. You can't live too much in healing the trauma, because then what else isn't being lived, expressed, brought into the world? And it's funny, Val called me out on it earlier because I wanted to jump in and she saw it, and it was like, is it balance? Do we need balance? But how do you balance that? Like, how the heck do you balance that? Right? And if it's my own trauma, like, then that's mine to navigate with what I'm balancing and what feels right and light to me in any given day. But when you're talking about trauma, and when you're talking about this I'm going to call it systemic racism, but I want to use a better word to just talk about this blanket of approach that it's talking about all of these people across all of this time. How is it for me to be able to say, well, I'm doing this, so it means that? Like, do you know what I'm trying to say here? Because I'm struggling to find some of the words, but it's just such a huge topic, and it's hard to know in any given moment how to navigate and how to do your part. And it's easier to look, at least for me, it's easier to look at what I am doing personally and how I am interacting in the world, than how do we look at it from this larger perspective. So thank you to everyone on this panel for sharing perspectives and views and being brave enough to dive into something that's really scary. And I'm going to lighten things up for a moment here, Laureli, because I have never heard that if you are fifth dimensional enough that you can't get COVID. So that's interesting. That was a new one for me. And there is so much going on right now, and I just want to hold space for all of us and everybody going through everything, all of these things that are going on in the world, you know, the natural disasters that are happening too. I mean, it's just, this is a time of a lot of upheaval, and I'm not big in astrology, but I do follow a few astrologists. And they keep talking about, you know, like this is a period of upheaval, and there's going to be a lot in terms of the government and in terms of the people and in terms of nature. And, you know, like there's just a lot going on. People have been floating around that thing with, like, there's a meme floating around about how many planets are aligned, and the last time this happened, Rome fell, and the last time this happened, you know, and astrologists have confirmed that, like, these are all happening at the same time right now, where it's been huge shifts in our history. And I have goosebumps as I'm saying that, because like that to me just really rings true. Like, this is an opportunity to make some huge shifts. And I'm seeing spiritual bypassing, so I hope I'm not spiritual bypassing as I'm saying this, but I'm going to end it there because I don't want to go off on a tangent. But thank you all for the perspectives and sharing.
I want to say thank you for jumping in and sharing. I appreciate deeply what you shared, and in particular, your willingness to share vulnerably, as many of us have been doing, not knowing, maybe feeling like uncertain and scared, and leaping in and sharing anyway, and learning from each other, and maybe saying things we wish we would change. Like, all of this is being willing to play with our shadow with each other here and in public, I think is greatly of service. Lisa.
You know, I've lived a lot of my life feeling really uncertain of who I am. And after the relationship that I left and leaving the community of yoga, because of the style of the tradition that I was that I was living under, and that's nobody was doing it to me, it was me. And the messages that I bring forward about love are spiritually given to me in a form that it's very easily misinterpreted as fluff. So I feel kind of like what I have said has been a little bit misinterpreted as if being a loving person isn't enough in our world right now, and that I have to take some other kind of action. My action is in the friendships that I'm creating with people of color right now in my life. And that might not sound like enough to other people, or maybe even people of color. But the work that I've done on learning how to love myself has been in perfect alignment with the people of color who have walked into my life, who I can now engage with without all the shit that might have been causing me to be afraid of them for one reason or the other. So being love and being light is effective in the actions that other people might perceive as a non-action type of thing. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that there's an evolution of our framework, the physical body, not just how we think. It's an evolution of our entirety that creates and causes everything that you guys are driving and wanting in this discussion that we're having about racism. So my way of diving into the depths of a rushing, raging river to save a child is to do the work that we're talking about, and then be the person who's going to welcome people of color into my life instead of being afraid because we don't look the same. So I had to bring that forward because I've been on many of these panels, and nobody knows this because I leave them feeling misinterpreted about what love is many, many times. You know, what is love? What is love? And can we look at it outside of the fractions and the frameworks that we are accustomed to thinking about love in a certain way? Love is nice, love is kind, love is you know, butterflies and puppy tails, as Henry mentioned earlier, right? Like that's where we have been misinterpreting what love really is. Love also causes us to jump in the water and save a child. Love does that, not fear. Love causes me to open my arms to a man who wants to marry me because I clean a house. Like this is what love does. Love welcomes people that we hate into our heart to transmute. This is what love does. I love you because I feel afraid of your judgment of me. I love that. I love that. I can feel this way right now. I love the fact that when I come onto these panels and I talk about love and get misinterpreted and misunderstood, the whole pain in my heart, as if I love it, is not accepted in this world. It's not accepted to love things. It's not accepted to love things. And I am here to tell you that we can. We can love each other. We can love the hard things. We can love what's happening in our planet right now. In our planet, not just this country, our planet. We can love it to transmute it and transform it. Because every time I turn towards hatred and discomfort about what's happening and then throw that into my heart and keep it locked up in there, I'm just contributing to the pain. That is the undertow of where we're going. It's throwing us upward. That's kind of what I was trying to say about Val in her description of that prayer. Love is present in our world right now, and it's throwing us upward. That's why I'm coughing all this stuff up. That's why all of us are. Everybody watching, we're here to cough this stuff up.
Great. Go ahead, Val. And we're getting conversation happening about some of these topics in the chat. This is great. I want to presence too that we've only got like 10 more minutes, so we want to think about. Go ahead and share, Val. Go ahead and share, but we want to be closing this up too. And if we don't have to keep it perfectly closed, yeah.
Well, I just, I didn't know where the conversation would go when I asked to talk about the darkness in the country and the world. And I Lisa, I love that you said when you hate it, how that feels, when you fight it, how that feels, when you love it, how that feels. In the beginning of COVID, I had a friend really get angry at me for not going to all these climate things and just talking about climate change all the time. She said, "What's wrong with you? We're, burning up and you're not doing anything about it." And then somebody else got really angry with me because I wouldn't speak of my white privilege, that I wasn't just posting about it and talking about it all the time. Although I didn't like the word privilege, and she said, "What word would you use?" And I realized the word would be maybe advantage. I kind of like that word advantage because it doesn't close as many doors. Like I'm always wondering, how can we open the door to conversation rather than closing it with our very words? And I too long to describe that, but and then somebody got mad at me for not. There was like 5 things. Oh, a friend was standing outside the detention center where they were putting the immigrants, and they were getting COVID. They were being separated from their families. It was just a horror story. And she was so upset because I wasn't showing up there every Monday and standing with her when I was trying to be at work, be at my job. But there was like 5 things. I had people really angry at me for not doing their things that where their passion was. And it was hard to sit in my center and love everybody. But really, the word I've been using a lot with myself lately is respect, self-respect. I have a hard time getting to respect myself, which is a boundary. What is it? Brene Brown said that if she's a bitch, she's a lot more loving. Like, how do I make that boundary around myself so I can love? So I have that some containment where I feel safe to love and safe to be in that resonance. And then just because we're coming to a close, I have another poem that wants to be shared. And it's 2 of you have heard it before, but it's really insistent. And it's called Soar Ready, Soar Like a Bird. I had my feathers replaced today, along my shoulders and the back of my neck. The old ones hardly catching the currents anymore. I'd forgotten to molt and hung on to everything I ever had. Today, I let go, pluck the disheveled, and replace them with the grand. Part angel, part great blue heron, and downy owl feathers along my spine. I don the talon feet of hawk, firm, relaxed, unfettered by storms. I see the moon different, shadows as friends. Thanks. Those poems get really insistent.
Flow coming through us. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Practitioners, thank you for boldly facing our shadows in our conversation. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation in the chat too. Thank you others for being here for the conversation and for sharing some of your words. Well, to close out, I know I want to have the practitioners share again who we each are. We each have specials tonight, and I'll put again in the chat where you can share feedback about today. If you're willing to share your contact info, your email, we'll put you in the drawing for a free 30-minute session with one of us of your choice. I'll put all of the practitioners' information in the chat again right now too. So the panel worked out very differently than what we thought it might be, and I deeply appreciate what it's been. All right. Anyone want to share first? Make sure you share your name and all the modalities, all the work you do, and how people can reach out to you. So it's here in the recording. Go ahead, Susie.
Okay, I'm Susy Parker Goins of Blue Lightning Healing and Blue Lightning Healing Meditations. My website is bluelightninghealing.com, and that's where you can contact me, access a lot of my podcast links. And I am so grateful that we all came together today to create a container in which we could explore so much, totally different than what I was thinking. And this turns out to be exactly what it needed to be. Thanks.
Thanks, Susie. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, wow. This conversation turned into so much more than I was prepared for. And I love that I was challenged. And again, thank you to everybody for sharing, because this was big and hopefully helpful. My name again is Karen Coccia. You can find me at karencoccia.com. So Karen with a K, Coccia with a C, COCCIA.com. And also on Facebook, Soul Alignment with Karen Coccia. I am a quantum energy healer and a soul alignment coach. And I really help my clients work on a one-to-one basis with just getting rid of all of the things that are holding them back from being who they came here to be. And I'm also offering a free masterclass in a few weeks. I know that Laureli's popped the link down there, and it's just on my website, KarenCoccia.com/taking back the wheel. All about really living in your sovereignty. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to share and to step into uncharted waters and unknown places tonight, and the opportunity for me to grow quite a bit as a person just listening to what you all shared. So thank you again. Take care.
Thanks, Karen. Looks like Henry's ready to go next.
Yeah. So, I was like so ready to have this amazing panel where we talk about shadow work and what that is and how you do it. I totally did not think I'd be doing shadow work. That's the last thing that was on my mind. So, and I have to tell you, I was like trembling here. Like I didn't even recognize it. But at some point I'm going like, what's going on? Is like my blood pressure too low or something? Like, no, you're just scared actually. So it's just really great, like great experience, I don't want to have it right away again, but great experience. So listen, I'll have it anytime. I never say no to shadow work, never, because it's what I love. But point being, the information. So I am a tarotist. I love using the tarot to get at things that the intellect might not be able to get to. I'm a spiritual director. I help people connect with their divine self, or the divine, or God, or whatever that's like for them. I really love helping people with their purpose, and shadow work can help you figure out what your purpose is. And I think all of it just works together. I have a special 30% off, or 33% off. So it's $30 for a 30-minute session, $50 for a 50-minute session. And the information for all of us practitioners is in the chat. So you can find that out. And you can also get a hold of me at henryindiaholden.com. And also I am teaching a class about intuitive readings of the tarot. This is how I was taught, and it's powerful. And it's the most wonderful tool I have ever come across. And I'm not that woo-woo, but I've learned to become woo-woo, and I'm grateful for it. And so this class starts on October 9th. It's 4 Saturdays in a row, 2 hours each time. And we delve into the history and all kinds of other things. So if you want to find out, but just come to my website and you can find out more. And yeah.
Go ahead. The last bit you were going to say.
No, I have no idea. I was just trying to gracefully end this.
I want to say there are cards that are getting created too that will be shared at this workshop, correct?
Yes. I am developing a wonderful deck of tarot that I love so much. And because none of the decks have been inclusive enough and broad enough from me, because I want to include everyone. And so anyway, so that's the deck I'm making. It's a deck of light as well. And not light as in opposed to dark, but light as in it's just a lot of brightness to it. Thanks for bringing that up, Laureli. Thank you all. It's just a privilege to be with you.
Thanks, Henry. All right, Lisa, Val, who wants to go?
I actually decided in the beginning that I wasn't going to make this about my business, so I'm not going to go over all of that. Laureli's put my information in the chat. I was just thinking about how what I have learned here tonight, aside from all the miraculous little beings that are in front of me speaking their truth, is that I was here to be comfortable with mine. So I'm just gonna send you all off and hope that you can be well and free in all of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And for those of you watching, if any of you want to get in touch with Lisa, reach out to me and I'll connect you. All right.
So, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being on here. One of my favorite people is, I forget his name, but his quote that I like is he always said that his job is to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. And I Barbaro. His name is Barbaro. And I think that is one of my things that I do in life, especially as a poet, and invite people in deeper and to understand deeper. And yeah, this was unexpected. I think we did do some shadow work. So you can find me at Poet Val. My name's Valerie Szarek, poetval.com. I do shamanic healing sessions, energy healing sessions, whatever shows up. And I also offer a soul-centered writing workshop once a month. And October is my favorite. The class usually fills twice. It'll be on Zoom. It's called Writing with the Ancestors. So we'll delve into finding who your ancestors, who and what they are, on a way broader base than Grandpa Henry and Aunt Jane, and really embody it and really get to know this through Writing with the Ancestors, soul-centered writing workshop. And I can write custom poems for you. So yeah, check out my website, Poet Val. Thanks. And I have a special on there too.
You do, and let me go get your information. I was fixing Lisa's information. I put a new chat in, or a new link in for Lisa. All right, and here's Val's information there in the chat. 2 shamanic healing sessions for $75 each. I'm Laureli Shimayo. I'm an intuitive eye reader and a body psychology coach. And I've been studying racial justice for the last year, and my learning edge is putting it into practice. And I'm taking steps and making mistakes and errors and learning and doing some of it in public and sharing in public some of my learnings. And yeah, journey, like that's what I'm here to do. And I realize part of my edge is to continue to share with the communities I'm part of. So part of that is the practitioner communities and the events that we create. Yeah, so I posted a learning on Facebook recently, and I put a reference to that in the chat too. If you want to see that, I'm happy to share about that. I can get a link just for the post. So yeah, I'm an intuitive eye reader and a body psychology coach, and my aim is to help people allow as much of the light to shine through. And part of that is looking at where we're not letting it shine through in various ways, and compassionately, heartfully playing and loosening with all that's here, the light that's coming through and the places where we're blocking the light. You can find out more about me and all that I do at laurelishimayo.com. That's LAURELISHIMAYO.com. And I made a comment earlier in the chat too that my name and the idea of cultural appropriation and my name, it's all really complex. Right? What's in flow and what's not. And I don't know all the answers at all. I have some events coming up. I have this Saturday, I'm teaching a class on learning to use O cards for doing intuitive readings. That's at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'll put the information in the chat again. And then Saturday, I'm also part of Authentic Seattle, and we have an in-person kind of informal social gathering in the park. That's 5 to 7:30, and I'll show up later for that because we have something else event happening for MeWe fairs that afternoon. I'm leading Be Here Now in a Circle, an authentic relating experience on Sunday. And I also have it again on Friday next week. Those are examples of some of the things I have going on. And then MeWe fairs. So MeWeFairs.com, we've got lots coming on too. We've got a lot in the next few days. Tomorrow, Friday, we have a metaphysics and intuition practice circle. So if you are practicing doing readings and healings, come and practice on your peers. It's a small price to be there. We have BIPOC pricing for all of our different events, and I give some to Real Rent Duwamish for all of the events that we do. I think the Facebook events will say that. They don't all say that in the chat. Saturday, October 2, from 4 to 6 p.m., we have an Anything and Everything panel. This is a training panel. We have practitioners that are new to being on stage, new to sharing their work in public, or practicing new modalities that will be answering questions from the audience. They pay, it's half price for that panel, and we support the practitioners as they learn to share on the stage. And then Sunday, from 5 to 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, we have our first panel that's all on tarot. So we have, I think, like 8 practitioners that are all sharing about tarot. Yeah, very exciting. And then next Wednesday, October 6th, we have a panel on medical intuition for people and animals. That'll be some of what's coming up. We got a lot of things coming up. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us. yeah, big exploration today, very different than it might have gone, and right, all perfect. Thank you, everyone, particularly those of you on the panel, for being here with me as we explore and demonstrate what it is to do shadow work with each other. Yeah, great to have that happen. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for being here with us too, staying with us the whole time. A lot of you did. And I'm gonna take off the spotlights now. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I will turn off the recording.